They laughed at the widow when they saw her covering the house with mud until they discovered the reason. Martha Miller never imagined she would become the subject of laughter and malicious whispers in the small town of Hope Hollow in the countryside of Vermont. At 52 years old, a widow for only 6 months, she had become the favorite topic of conversation in the church square and at Mr. Arthur's general store. It was on a frigid January morning that it all began. Martha appeared in the yard of her wooden house with buckets full of mud, an old hoe, and a determination that no one could understand. She began covering the exterior walls of her modest home with that thick mixture of earth and water, working with her bare hands even in the biting cold that turned her fingers purple. Mrs. Beatrice, the closest neighbor, was the first to notice the strange activity. She called her husband, Mr. Clifford, who left his half-finished coffee to peek over the bamboo fence. "Clifford, come see this. Martha is slapping mud all over the house like it's plaster. Has she lost her mind for good?" whispered Beatrice, adjusting her floral apron and stretching on her tiptoes. The man watched his neighbor working methodically for a few minutes. Martha wore a dark scarf tied around her head, protecting her brown hair already graying at the temples. Her simple clothes, a grey wool sweater and a long brown skirt, were quickly getting dirty with splatters of mud. "That woman has gone completely mad. Harold barely passed and she's already doing these strange things. It must be the grief," commented Clifford, shaking his head in disapproval. The news spread through the town with the speed of a fire in dry weather. By late morning, a small group of onlookers had discreetly formed in the street, pretending to talk about other matters while they watched Martha work. "My goodness, look at that! She's covering the whole house in mud like it's a mud dauber's nest," said Mrs. Gladys, the bakery owner, with a tone of superiority. "She must have mental problems. Grief sometimes does that to people." The low laughs and malicious comments multiplied when Martha appeared carrying more buckets of mud from the backyard, where a small spring formed a creek. She showed no concern for the curious looks or the whispered conversations. Her concentration was completely focused on the hard work she had set out to do. Around noon, when the sun finally began to warm the icy air a little, Martha took a break. She sat on the wooden porch of her house and wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her muddy hand. It was then that Mrs. Mildred, the president of the town's Women's Community League, approached with her 2 youngest daughters. "Martha, my dear, what are you doing there?" asked Mildred with feigned concern in her voice. "This is no time to be renovating the house. You should still be in mourning." Martha lifted her tired eyes and looked directly at the woman. Her hands were chapped from the cold and dirty with earth, but her eyes shone with an unshakable determination. "Mrs. Mildred, with all due respect, that is none of your business," she replied in a calm but firm voice. "I know what I'm doing." "But child, what kind of renovation is this? I've never seen anyone cover a wooden house with mud like this. This isn't going to work," insisted Mildred, while her daughters whispered to each other and pointed at the walls already half covered. "It will work, and I will finish it, you can be sure of that," said Martha, standing up and picking up the hoe again. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Mildred walked away, huffing with indignation, but not before whispering loudly enough for Martha to hear, "That woman really has lost her mind. Let's see how long she can keep up this madness." The buzz in the hollow grew throughout the afternoon. At Mr. Arthur's general store there was only one topic, the strange behavior of the widow Martha. "I bet she gives up by the end of the week," said Mr. Frank, the town mechanic. "This cold is bone-chilling, and there she is slapping mud like she's a mason." "I give her 2 weeks," retorted Mrs. Eleanor, the retired teacher. "Knowing Martha, she's as stubborn as they come, but 2 weeks at most." Mr. Arthur, a 70-year-old man who had known everyone in the hollow since they were children, shook his head thoughtfully while organizing the shelves. "You folks don't know Martha like I do. That woman, once she gets something in her head, is capable of moving mountains. Harold always said that about her. If she's doing this, she must have her reasons." "What reasons, Mr. Arthur?" asked Frank with a mocking smile. "What sensible reason would a person have for covering a wooden house with mud in the dead of winter?" The shopkeeper shrugged, but there was a thoughtful expression on his wrinkled face. "I don't know, son. But one thing I do know. Martha has always been a woman of few words and lots of action. If she's doing this, it must be important." Meanwhile, Martha kept working tirelessly. Her hands were growing more chapped from the cold, and small cuts appeared where the calluses couldn't protect her skin. Still, she didn't stop. With every bucket of mud applied to the wooden walls, she whispered words no one could hear. The work was harder than she had imagined. The mud needed to have just the right consistency to stick to the wood, neither too runny nor too dry. She had mixed dry straw into the dirt to give it more body, a technique she had learned watching her Harold work on other buildings years ago. Harold Miller had been a practical and hard-working man. A mason by trade, he knew all the secrets of traditional construction. During their 25 years of marriage, he had promised Martha many things. Some he managed to fulfill, others remained just promises. But there was one special promise made in his final years that he never got to complete. When the end of the day came, Martha was exhausted. Her back ached, her arms trembled with fatigue, but a significant portion of the house's side wall was already covered with the first layer of mud. She looked at the work done with quiet satisfaction and went inside to make some hot tea. The inside of the house was simple but cozy. Dark wood furniture, some made by Harold himself, decorated the small rooms. In the kitchen, a four-person table where only she sat now. In the bedroom, the double bed that seemed too large for one person. And throughout the house, photographs that told the story of a couple who had loved each other deeply for decades. Martha prepared her chamomile tea and sat in the living room rocking chair wrapped in a wool blanket. Through the window, she could see a few lights on in the neighbors' houses. She knew she was being talked about, that they were placing bets on when she would quit. But they didn't understand. They didn't know what this work meant to her. Her sore hands held the warm cup as she looked at a photograph on the side table. In the picture, she and Harold smiled, embracing in front of the house right after they married and came to live in Hope Hollow. They were young, full of dreams and plans. Harold had promised they would make that house the coziest place in the world. "My Harold, if you were here, you'd help me with this, wouldn't you?" she whispered to the photograph. "But I'll manage on my own. I promise I'll manage." The next morning, very early, even before the sun had fully risen, Martha was already in the backyard preparing more mud. The cold was even more intense, and her breath formed small clouds in the icy air, but her determination seemed to have grown overnight. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mrs. Beatrice, who always woke early to tend to the chickens, heard the noises in the neighbor's yard and went to spy again. She was surprised to see Martha already working actively, applying mud to a new section of the wall. "Clifford, wake up!" she nudged her still sleeping husband. "Martha is out there again, covering the house with mud. And look, it's colder today than yesterday." Clifford grumbled but got up to take a look. He watched the neighbor work for a few minutes, noting the careful technique she used to spread the mud evenly on the wood. "Beatrice, I'll tell you one thing. Whatever is going on in that woman's head, she knows what she's doing. Look how she spreads that mud. It's sticking properly to the wood. This isn't the work of someone who's lost their mind." "What do you mean, Clifford? You think it's normal for a woman to cover her whole house in mud?" "It's not normal, but she's doing it right. My father used to do that sometimes to the houses on the family farm. He said it protected the wood and kept the house warmer in winter." Beatrice became thoughtful for a moment. Could that be why she's doing it? To warm the house? Could be, or it could be something else. But whatever it is, she's determined. During the morning, more neighbors began discreetly observing Martha's work. Some still made unkind comments, but others began to show genuine curiosity about what she was doing. Around 10 o'clock, an unexpected figure appeared at Martha's door. Diane Miller, Harold's sister-in-law. Diane was a 55-year-old woman, always well-dressed and concerned with appearances. She lived in the nearest larger town and only came to the Hollow on special occasions. "Martha, what is this story I'm hearing?" Diane spoke loudly so the neighbors could hear. "They told me you're doing some strange things here at the house." Martha stopped working and looked at her sister-in-law. Diane wore an expensive wool coat and shoes that were definitely not appropriate for the Hollow's dirt ground. "Hi, Diane. How are you?" "I'm fine, but worried about you," Diane said in a dramatic tone. "Martha, You can't stay here alone doing these strange things. What is this about covering the house with mud? People are talking. They're laughing at you. Let them talk. I'm not harming anyone. But Martha, you have to think about your reputation, the family's reputation. Harold was respected here in the Hollow, and now you're making people think that our family has problems. Martha felt a rage growing in her chest. She dropped the hoe and turned completely to Diane. Diane, with all due respect, you have no right to come here and tell me what I should or shouldn't do in my own house. You show up here once a year, at most, and now you want to give your opinion on how I should live. Martha, I'm worried about you. This isn't normal. A woman in mourning doesn't stay there slapping mud on a house like a bricklayer. You need help. Help? Martha laughed bitterly. Where were you when I really needed help? When Harold was sick and I hadn't slept properly for months taking care of him? When I had to sell our things to pay for the medicine? Where was your concern then? Diane was speechless for a few seconds. She hadn't visited her brother during the final months of his illness, always making excuses related to work or social engagements in the city. Martha, this was different. I didn't know it was so serious. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Martha interrupted. And now you come here worried about the family's reputation? The only thing I'm doing is taking care of my house the way I think it should be done. But why cover it with clay, Martha? That doesn't make any sense at all. Martha looked directly into Diane's eyes for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. There was so much pain and determination in that gaze that Diane felt uncomfortable. It makes sense to me, and that's enough. Martha, I'm going to be clear with you. Diane shifted to a more threatening tone. If you keep up with these oddities, I'll have to take measures. I can't let my sister-in-law become a laughingstock for an entire town. What kind of measures? Martha asked with a dangerous calm. There are places for people who are having emotional troubles after family losses, places where you could get proper help. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Martha stared at Diane with an expression mixing disbelief and contained anger. Are you threatening to have me committed? I'm trying to help you, Martha, before it's too late. Get off my property, Diane. Now. Martha! Now! Martha shouted for the first time, making Diane take a step back. Get out of my house and don't come back until you know how to respect me. Diane hurried away, muttering something about talking to responsible people and taking the necessary steps. Martha watched her leave and then returned to her work with even greater intensity, slapping the clay onto the wall harder than necessary. The neighbors who had watched the argument were divided between those who thought Martha had been too aggressive and those who understood her irritation. Mrs. Mildred, always ready to give an opinion, commented loudly enough for everyone to hear. You know, Diane has a point. Martha really does need help. This behavior isn't normal. But Mr. Arthur, who had watched everything from the door of his general store, shook his head in disagreement. Diane's the one with no right to say anything. She disappeared when Harold was in need and now shows up wanting to give moral lessons. Martha did right to run her off. The rest of the day passed with Martha working in silence, completely ignoring the neighbors' looks and whispers. She had finished an entire side wall and started working on the front wall of the house. The clay was drying well, creating a smooth, even surface that contrasted with the wood of the parts not yet covered. In the late afternoon, when Martha finally stopped to rest, she noticed a small figure watching her work from a distance. It was Daisy, a girl of about 10, Mr. Arthur's granddaughter. The child was standing on the corner, clearly curious but without the courage to approach. Martha waved to the girl with a tired smile. Daisy hesitated for a moment, but then approached timidly. "Hi, Mrs. Martha," the girl said in a soft voice. "Hi, sweetie. How are you?" "I'm okay. Can I ask you something?" "Of course you can." "Why are you putting clay on the house?" Martha sat on the porch and motioned for Daisy to sit beside her. The girl obeyed, her small legs swinging back and forth. "Do you know what a promise is, Daisy?" "Yes, I do. It's when you say you're going to do something and you have to do it." "That's right. I made a very important promise and I'm trying to keep it." "Who did you make the promise to?" Martha looked at the photograph in the living room window where she could see Harold smiling at her through the glass. To someone very special whom I loved very much. Daisy followed Martha's gaze and understood immediately. For your Harold, right? Yes. For my Harold. Did he ask you to cover the mud house? Martha smiled softly for the first time in days. Not exactly, dear, but he taught me that sometimes we need to do difficult things to protect what we love. Daisy was thoughtful for a moment. My grandma always says that when someone we love goes away, we have to keep them here. She pointed to her heart. Are you keeping your Harold in the house? The child's innocent question touched Martha in a way she hadn't expected. Tears formed in her eyes, but she managed to keep her voice steady. In a way, yes. I'm keeping a very important part of him. Daisy nodded as if she understood perfectly, though it was clear she didn't fully grasp the complexity of the situation. I think it's beautiful, she said simply. The house is looking different, but beautiful. You think so? I do. It looks like the house is getting new clothes so it won't be cold. Martha smiled genuinely for the first time since Harold had passed. The child's simplicity and honesty brought a little light to her heavy heart. Thank you, Daisy, you're very kind. You're welcome, Mrs. Martha. Can I come back tomorrow to see how it's looking? Of course, dear. It'll be a pleasure. Daisy hopped off the porch and ran back to her grandfather's house, waving at Martha as she ran. Martha watched her go and felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe not everyone in the Hollow considered her crazy. Maybe there were still people capable of looking beyond appearances. That night, as she prepared her simple dinner, Martha reflected on the day's events. Diane's threat worried her more than she wanted to admit. She knew her sister-in-law had connections in town and could really cause trouble if she wanted to. But the conversation with Daisy had given her strength to continue. She sat at the kitchen table with her plate of vegetable soup and homemade bread, looking at the empty chair where Harold used to sit. For years they had shared meals at that table, talking about the workday, making plans for the future, dreaming of improvements for the house. Harold, my love, she whispered to the empty chair. I think you'd be proud of me. I'm managing to do what you always wanted to do. It's not easy, but I'm doing it. She imagined Harold sitting there with his gentle smile and kind eyes, silently approving her effort. He had always been a man of few words but much affection. When he talked about his dreams for the house, his eyes shone in a special way. After dinner, Martha went to the bedroom and opened an old trunk at the foot of the bed. Inside, carefully organized, was Harold's work clothes, his time-worn shirts, his pants stained with paint and cement, his tool belt. She took one of the shirts and pressed it to her face, still feeling the familiar scent of his skin mixed with the aroma of wood and earth. I will manage, my love. I promise I will manage, she repeated, hugging the shirt as if she were hugging Harold himself. The next morning, Martha woke before dawn, determined to continue her work. But when she went out to the yard, she found an unpleasant surprise. Someone had thrown stones at the wall she had covered with mud the day before, damaging part of the work. Martha knelt before the damaged wall, delicately touching the areas where the mud had chipped away from the impact of the stones. Her heart sank as she saw days of hard work partially destroyed, but instead of giving in to despair, she felt a controlled anger growing in her chest. She looked around, searching for clues about who could have done it. There were no clear footprints on the ground, but she found some of the stones used in the attack. They were the kind of stones that were abundant on the dirt road leading to the center of the hollow. Cowards, she murmured through her teeth. They do this at night, hiding like cowards. Martha went back inside and made a strong coffee. She needed energy to repair the damage and continue the work. As she drank the coffee, she mentally planned how she would rearrange her routine to avoid new attacks. Perhaps she would need to work at different times, or find a way to protect the work during the night. When she went out again to begin the repairs, she found Daisy standing in front of the house, looking at the damaged wall with an expression of indignation that seemed too big for her young face. Mrs. Martha, who did this? The girl asked with anger in her voice. I don't know, dear. But don't worry, I'll fix it. That's so ugly. You worked so hard yesterday. Why would someone do such a thing? Martha knelt in front of Daisy and placed her hands on the girl's shoulders. Sometimes, Daisy, Some people don't understand why we do certain things, and when they don't understand, they get scared or angry. And they do bad things. But you're not hurting anyone. I know that and you know that, but some people think differently. Daisy was thoughtful for a moment, her little hands clenched into small fists. Mrs. Martha, I'm going to tell my grandfather. He doesn't like people who do mean things to others. You don't need to, dear. I'll handle it myself. But it's not fair. Martha smiled at the child's sincere indignation. It was comforting to know that at least one person in the hollow was genuinely concerned about her. Life isn't always fair, Daisy, but that doesn't mean we should give up on doing what's right. Are you really going to keep going? Yes, I am. I'll keep going until I finish. Daisy nodded with determination, as if making a silent promise to support Martha. I'll stay here a little while and help you. You don't have to, dear. You must have other things to do. No, I want to help. I can carry mud in the small buckets. Martha felt her eyes fill with tears. That child's kindness amid so much hostility was like an unexpected gift. All right, but just for a little while, and be careful not to get too dirty. During the morning, Martha and Daisy worked together repairing the damage caused by the stones. The girl carried small portions of mud in a little bucket that Martha had found and tried to imitate the woman's movements as she spread the material on the wall. Mrs. Martha, how did you learn to do this? Daisy asked, while observing the woman's careful technique. By watching my Harold work. He was very skilled with his hands. Did he build houses? He built and fixed them. He said every house needs care to become strong and cozy. And that's why you're doing this? To give care to the house? Martha stopped working for a moment and looked at the girl. How could a 10-year-old understand so simply something that the adults in the hollow found incomprehensible? That's exactly it, Daisy. I'm giving care to the house. I think it works. The house is starting to look like it's being loved. The girl's words touched Martha deeply. She had never thought of it that way, but that was exactly what she was doing, showing love through hard and dedicated work. Around 10 o'clock, Mr. Arthur appeared looking for his granddaughter. Daisy, your mother is looking for you, he said, but stopped to observe the work the two were doing. Good morning, Mrs. Martha. Good morning, Mr. Arthur. The man examined the repaired wall with an experienced eye. He had worked many years in construction before opening the general store, and he recognized a job well done when he saw one. May I give my opinion on your work? Yes, you may. It's looking good. The technique is right. The mud is sticking properly to the wood. Who taught you? My Harold. I used to watch him work and pay attention. Harold was good at what he did, Mr. Arthur said with respect in his voice. He worked on my house about 15 years ago. Did an impeccable job. He always took great care with his work. And you inherited that from him. But may I ask why you chose to do this now, in winter, alone? Martha hesitated for a moment. Mr. Arthur was one of the people she most respected in the hollow, and she felt she could trust him. But she still wasn't ready to reveal her motivations completely. It's a personal matter, Mr. Arthur, a promise I need to keep. The man nodded, not pressing for more details. I understand, but if you need anything, you can count on me, and if anyone is bothering you, I want you to tell me too. Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Daisy, let's get going. Your mother is worried. The girl said goodbye to Martha with a tight hug and ran after her grandfather. Martha watched her walk away and felt immense gratitude for the friendly presence of those two. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Martha managed to finish the repairs and even make a bit more progress on the front wall. The work was progressing, and she began to visualize how the house would look when completely covered in mud. Around midday, she heard the sound of a car approaching. It was rare for there to be vehicle traffic in the small hollow, so she looked out the window to see who it was. Her heart sank when she recognized Diane's car. Her sister-in-law had returned, but this time she wasn't alone. With her was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. Martha immediately imagined he must be some kind of authority Diane had brought to cause trouble. She went out onto the porch before they reached the door, crossing her arms and waiting with a firm expression on her face. Martha, Diane began in a formal tone, this is Dr. Stephen Vance from the County Health Department. He's come here to talk to you about your situation. The man stepped forward with a smile that tried to be kind, but seemed condescending. "Mrs. Martha, good morning. I've received some reports about your recent behavior and came here to offer my help." "What kind of help?" Martha asked directly. "Well, I understand you are going through a difficult period after the loss of your husband. It's natural for that to cause some emotional imbalances. There are support programs available for people in your situation." "Support programs?" Diane interjected into the conversation. "Martha, the doctor can refer you to a place where you'll receive proper care, a place where qualified professionals will help you get through this difficult phase." Martha understood immediately what was happening. Diane had indeed carried out her threat to try to have her committed. "Dr. Stephen," she said in a controlled voice, "I appreciate your concern, but I don't need any kind of help. I'm perfectly fine." "Mrs. Martha, with all due respect, people going through emotional problems don't always recognize that they need help," the man said in his condescending tone. "Your neighbors have reported behaviors that indicate possible mental instability." "Behaviors like what?" "Well, covering a wooden house with mud, working alone in adverse weather conditions, social isolation, aggressiveness toward family members. These are signs that you may be facing psychological difficulties." Martha felt anger rising inside her, but forced herself to stay calm. "Doctor, I am making improvements to my house. There is nothing illegal or dangerous about that. As for social isolation, I have always been a private person, and as for aggressiveness toward family members, I simply will not accept people coming to my home to disrespect me." "Mrs. Martha, I understand your resistance," Dr. Stephen continued, "but sometimes difficult decisions must be made for a person's own good. There are legal measures that can be taken when someone poses a risk to themselves or others." The threat was clear. Martha looked at Diane, who avoided her gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the situation she herself had created. "Doctor," Martha said with a dangerous calm, "I would like to know exactly what laws I am breaking, what risks I am posing to myself or others, and what your scientific criteria are for determining that I need to be committed." The man became visibly uncomfortable with the direct question and Martha's firm posture. He had expected to find a fragile and confused woman, not someone who would question him so lucidly. "Well, Mrs. Martha, it's not exactly about breaking laws, but rather about—" "Doctor," Martha interrupted him, "are you trained in psychology or psychiatry?" "I am a general practitioner and work for the county health department. That does not answer my question. Do you have specific training in mental health to make a psychological assessment?" Dr. Stephen looked at Diane, clearly seeking support. Diane tried to regain control of the situation. "Martha, you don't need to be hostile with the doctor. He is here to help you. Diane, you brought a public official to my home to threaten me with commitment based on neighborhood gossip. I have every right to question his qualifications to make this assessment." "Mrs. Martha," Dr. Stephen tried to regain control, "I understand you are being defensive, but that only confirms the need for professional monitoring." "Doctor," a voice interrupted the conversation. It was Mr. Arthur, who had approached without anyone noticing. "Excuse me, but may I know what is happening here?" Diane turned, annoyed. "This is none of your business, Mr. Arthur. When someone is threatening a resident of our hollow, yes, it is my business," he replied firmly, "especially when that person is an honest woman who has never harmed anyone." Dr. Stephen tried to explain. "Sir, we are only offering psychological support for Mrs. Martha, who is going through a difficult time." "Psychological support?" Mr. Arthur laughed bitterly. "Doctor, I have known this woman for over 20 years. She is one of the most level-headed and hard-working people I know. If she decided to do something to her house, she must have her reasons, and she doesn't need any outsider coming here to say she's crazy." "Mr. Arthur," Diane tried to intervene, "you don't understand the gravity of the situation." "Diane, the gravity of the situation is you bringing a stranger here to threaten a woman who just lost her husband. That is what is serious." During this argument, more neighbors began to approach, drawn by the raised voices. Martha observed that a small crowd was forming in front of her and realized this would be a decisive moment. Either the neighbors would support her, or they would turn definitively against her. Dr. Stephen, realizing the situation was getting out of control, tried a more diplomatic approach. "Well, perhaps we can resolve this more calmly. Mrs. Martha, would it be possible for you to accept just a few voluntary consultations with a mental health professional, just to talk, with no kind of commitment?" Martha looked around at the faces of her neighbors. Some seemed genuinely concerned, others curious, some clearly expecting some kind of drama. But she noticed that Mr. Arthur remained at her side, and that gave her courage. "Doctor, I agree to undergo a complete psychological evaluation conducted by a qualified and independent professional, provided that this evaluation is done here in the Hollow, in the presence of witnesses of my choosing, and that the results are made public." The proposal took Dr. Stephen by surprise. He had expected her to resist completely or passively accept his recommendations. A public and transparent evaluation was not something he could easily manipulate. "Well, that would be irregular. Psychological evaluations are normally confidential." "Doctor," Martha said firmly, "if you are so convinced that I need help, you should have no problem proving it publicly. If I am truly a risk to myself or others, that should be easily demonstrated by a competent professional." Diane realized her plan was backfiring. Martha's firm and rational stance was impressing the neighbors, and her proposal put Dr. Stephen in a difficult position. "Martha, that isn't necessary. We can resolve this within the family." "Diane, you brought this to the public when you decided to bring authorities here. Now we will resolve it publicly," Martha replied without hesitation. Mr. Arthur spoke up again. "Doctor, I think Mrs. Martha's proposal is very fair. If she really needs help, a serious evaluation will show it. If she doesn't, it will clear her of these accusations." Other neighbors began to murmur among themselves. Martha realized the tide was turning in her favor. Her rational stance and proposal for transparency were winning people's respect. Dr. Stephen, clearly uncomfortable and realizing he had been cornered, tried a diplomatic exit. "Well, I'll consult my superiors about this possibility. Perhaps we can find a solution that satisfies everyone." "Perfect," Martha said. "In the meantime, I will continue with my work at home, and I hope I will not be bothered again based on gossip and prejudice." Diane, furious at the turn the situation had taken, whispered something in the doctor's ear and headed for the car. Dr. Stephen followed her, clearly relieved to be able to withdraw from the awkward situation. "This isn't over, Martha," Diane shouted before getting in the car. "You'll see I'm right." After the car drove away, the neighbors slowly dispersed, many of them coming to greet Martha and express their support. She realized she had earned a respect she didn't have before, simply by defending herself with dignity and intelligence. Mr. Arthur was the last to say goodbye. "Mrs. Martha, you handled yourself very well. You showed you have a steady head and the courage to face problems. Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Your support meant a lot to me." "Not at all. And if that Diane comes back causing trouble, you let me know. We folks in the Hollow look out for each other." When she was finally alone, Martha sat on the porch and let the tears flow freely. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. She had faced her greatest threat and emerged victorious. More than that, she had earned the respect of some neighbors and confirmed that there was still kindness and justice in the world. That afternoon she worked with renewed spirit. Each layer of clay she applied to the wall seemed to carry not only her personal determination, but also the support of the community that was beginning to understand her. When the sun began to set, Martha took a step back and admired the progress of her work. One side wall was completely finished, the front wall was halfway done, and she had started working on the back wall. The house was truly transforming, gaining a new personality with the clay covering. Daisy came running up, her face radiant with happiness. "Mrs. Martha, my grandfather told me you stood up to that mean lady who wanted to take you away." "It wasn't quite like that, dear, but it's true we had a serious conversation." "I'm so glad you stayed. I would have been very sad if they had taken you away." Martha knelt down and hugged the girl, feeling again that warmth in her heart that the child's presence always brought. "I'm not going anywhere, Daisy. I'm staying here until I finish my work." "And after you finish?" Then I'll keep living here in my beautiful, cozy house. Can I keep coming here? Always, dear, always. That night, Martha prepared a special dinner to celebrate her victory. She made Harold's favorite dish, chicken and dumplings with grits. She set 2 plates on the table, as she always did, and talked to the empty chair as if Harold were there. My love, today was an important day. I faced Diane and that doctor, and I managed to defend myself. You would be proud of me. And you know what's most important? I got support from some people here in the Hollow. Mr. Arthur was incredible, and little Daisy is an angel. She imagined Harold smiling, proud of the courage she had shown. The work on the house is coming along well. You can already see how it will look when it's done. It will be as you always dreamed, my love. Cozy, protected, snug. Martha finished dinner and went to the bedroom to get a box she kept at the back of the closet. It was an old shoebox tied with a sisal cord. Inside were the most precious memories of her marriage, letters Harold had written to her during their courtship, photographs of special moments, and a small notebook where he had written down his plans for improvements to the house. She opened the notebook carefully, fearing the yellowed pages might crumble in her hands. On the first page, in Harold's neat handwriting, was written, "Plans to make our house the coziest place in the world." The following pages contained simple but detailed drawings of improvements he wanted to make. A larger porch, kitchen shelves, a garden in the back, and on the last page, highlighted with a circle, was written, "Thermal insulation with clay, traditional technique to keep the heat in during winter." Martha traced the drawing with her finger, remembering when Harold had explained this technique to her. It was something his grandfather had taught him, a traditional way to protect wooden houses against the intense cold. Harold always said he wanted to do this to their house, but his work as a stonemason kept him busy with other people's projects, and he never found the time to care for his own home. "This is what you wanted to do, wasn't it, my Harold?" she whispered to the notebook. "You wanted our house cozy and protected, and I'm doing it for both of us." She closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. Now everything made even more sense. It wasn't just a promise she was keeping. It was a shared dream that was finally coming true. The next morning, Martha woke with renewed energy. She had slept better than she had in weeks, and felt she had found an inner peace she thought was lost forever. The work was no longer just about grief or promises. It was about love, memory, and the fulfillment of dreams. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. When she went out to the backyard, she found a pleasant surprise. Someone had left a pile of dry straw next to her mound of clay. There was also a simple note, "To help with the work, to a friend from the Hollow." Martha smiled, touched by the anonymous generosity. The straw was exactly what she needed to strengthen the clay mixture, and it would save her hours of work she would have spent searching for suitable material. She was mixing the clay with the straw when she heard voices approaching. To her surprise, it was Mrs. Beatrice and Mr. Clifford, her immediate neighbors. "Good morning, Martha," Mrs. Beatrice said, looking a bit awkward. "Good morning, Mrs. Beatrice, Mr. Clifford." Clifford cleared his throat before speaking. "Martha, we came here to apologize." "Apologize?" "Yes," Mrs. Beatrice continued. "Yesterday, after that circus Diane made here, we got to thinking, and we realized we weren't fair to you. We thought you were doing something strange, but after Mr. Arthur explained it might be an old thermal insulation technique, it all made sense," Clifford added. Martha stopped stirring the clay and looked at her neighbors. There was sincerity in their faces, and she could see they were genuinely ashamed. "You don't need to apologize. It's natural to be curious." "But we laughed at you, Martha. And that was wrong," Mrs. Beatrice insisted. "You're doing something difficult, all alone. And instead of offering help, we were gossiping." "And there's more," Clifford said. "We're almost certain it was Barney who threw stones at your wall the night before last." Martha was surprised by the information. Barney was a middle-aged man who lived a few houses down, known for being rude and having problems with drink. "How do you know?" Beatrice couldn't sleep that night because of the cold and went to make tea in the kitchen. She saw Barney walking down the street, kind of staggering, carrying something in his hands. And an hour later, We heard the sound of stones hitting, Mrs. Beatrice finished. At the time we didn't connect the dots, but later. We're going to talk to him, Clifford said firmly. This can't happen again. Martha was moved by her neighbor's attitude. It was the first time anyone had offered concrete help to protect her work. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Don't mention it, Martha, and if you need anything you can count on us, Mrs. Beatrice said, touching the woman's arm gently. After the neighbors left, Martha continued working with a lighter heart. Knowing she had people willing to protect her work made all the difference. She was no longer completely alone in her mission. Throughout the morning, other neighbors stopped by to greet her or simply observe the progress of the work. Martha noticed the atmosphere in the hollow had changed. Instead of laughter and malicious whispers, there was genuine curiosity and, in some cases, admiration for her determination. Around 10 o'clock, an unexpected person appeared. It was Father Thomas, the local church pastor. He was a young man, about 35, who had arrived in the hollow just 2 years before, but had earned everyone's respect for his simplicity and dedication. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha," he said with his gentle smile. "Good morning, Father Thomas. How are you?" "Well, thank you. I came because I heard about the situation you faced yesterday, and I wanted to offer my support." Martha stopped working and looked at the priest. She wasn't very religious, but she respected the young clergyman. "Thank you, Father." "Mrs. Martha, I don't understand much about construction, but I do understand people. And I see a strong, determined woman doing something she considers important. I see nothing wrong with that. Don't you think I should be in mourning, sitting quietly at home?" Father Thomas chuckled softly. "Mrs. Martha, everyone grieves in their own way. Some people isolate themselves, others keep busy. There is no right or wrong way. What matters is that you feel at peace with what you're doing." "I do feel at peace, Father. For the first time since Harold passed, I feel at peace." "Then you're doing the right thing, and if anyone questions it again, they can come see me too." The conversation with Father Thomas brought another layer of calm to Martha. Having the spiritual support of the community, even though she wasn't very religious, was important in a small town like Hope Hollow. The rest of the morning passed quickly. Martha managed to finish a large portion of the front wall and start working on the details around the windows. The work was becoming more and more refined, and she felt she was developing her own technique, based on what she had learned watching Harold but adapted to her own limitations and needs. At lunchtime, she stopped to rest and went to the kitchen to prepare a simple meal. As she cooked, she reflected on how her life had changed in the last few weeks. Harold's death had been devastating, but this project was giving her a purpose, a reason to get up every day with energy. She was finishing her meal when she heard a knock at the door. It was a woman she didn't know, well-dressed, carrying a camera. "Hi, sorry to bother you. My name is Jennifer Reed. I'm a journalist with the regional paper. Can I talk to you about your project?" Martha was surprised. She didn't know her work had attracted attention outside of town. "How did you hear about this?" "A professor from the state university posted some photos of your work on social media. The photos went viral, and now there's a lot of curiosity about the technique you're using." "Professor? Which professor?" "Dr. Lawrence Thorne from the architecture department. He said he passed by here a few days ago and was impressed with the technical quality of what you're doing." Martha vaguely remembered seeing a well-dressed man observing her work from a distance a few days before, but he had kept his distance and she hadn't paid it much mind. "Can I ask you a few questions about your project?" Jennifer insisted. Martha hesitated. On one hand, she didn't want unnecessary exposure. On the other, perhaps it was an opportunity to show that her work had merit and wasn't the act of an unstable person. "All right, but I'd prefer to talk out here while I work." "Perfect." Jennifer turned on a small recorder and started with basic questions about the project. "Mrs. Martha, can you explain what exactly you're doing to your house?" "I'm applying a clay coating to the exterior walls. It's an old thermal insulation technique." "And where did you learn this technique?" "From my husband. He was a mason and knew traditional building techniques." "Why did you decide to do this now?" Martha stopped working for a moment. This was the question she knew would come, but she still wasn't completely prepared to answer it publicly. My husband always wanted to do this to our house, but he never had the time. Now that he's gone, I decided to fulfill this dream of his. It must be very difficult work to do alone. It's difficult, but not impossible, and it gets easier every day. What do the people in town think of your project? At first, some people didn't understand, but now most of them support what I'm doing. Jennifer asked a few more questions about technical aspects of the work, and Martha answered with knowledge and confidence that impressed the journalist. It was clear she knew what she was doing and had thought carefully about every aspect of the project. One last question, Mrs. Martha. Some say you're doing this because of grief, that it's a way of dealing with loss. What do you think of that interpretation? Martha looked directly at the journalist. Maybe that's part of it too, but mostly it's love. It's a way of keeping the memory of someone very special alive by fulfilling a dream we shared. Jennifer turned off the recorder, clearly moved by the answer. Mrs. Martha, it was a pleasure to meet you. I'm sure your story will inspire many people. Thank you. I hope so. After the journalist left, Martha wondered if she had done the right thing by giving the interview, but she decided she had. It was important for people to understand her true motivations, rather than believing in gossip and malicious speculation. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. Martha was working on the back wall when Daisy came running up, a worried look on her face. Mrs. Martha, my grandpa wants to talk to you. It's urgent. What happened, dear? I'm not sure, but he was talking to some men and got really serious. Martha put down her work and went with Daisy to Mr. Arthur's general store. The man was in front of the establishment, talking quietly with Clifford and two other men she recognized as residents of the Hollow. Mr. Arthur, Daisy said you wanted to speak with me. Yes, Martha. We have a situation here you need to know about. What situation? Clifford stepped forward. Martha, Barney is spreading word that you're going to bring trouble to the Hollow. He's saying that with this business about the newspaper and the university professor, a bunch of outsiders are going to come, and it's going to ruin the peace of our Hollow. And there's more, Mr. Arthur added. He's trying to convince folks that you're doing this to make money from tourism or something like that. Martha sighed. It was always something. Always someone trying to create problems where there were none. And what do you think I should do? Nothing, said Mr. Arthur firmly. You haven't done anything wrong, but we thought you should know he's trying to turn people against you again. How many people are believing him? Not many, Clifford answered. After what happened yesterday with that doctor, most folks are on your side, but Barney is persistent when he wants to be. Thank you for telling me. I'll continue my work as usual. If he comes here to bother you, you holler, and we'll come running, Mr. Arthur said. Martha returned home thoughtfully. It seemed that whenever things started to calm down, a new problem arose. But she was learning not to be easily shaken. She had discovered an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. She was getting back to work when she saw Barney approaching. He was a tall, thin man, with unshaven stubble and dirty clothes. His eyes were red, and she could smell alcohol even from a distance. Martha, he said in a slurred voice, we need to talk. About what, Barney? About this nonsense you're doing here. What I do on my property is none of your business. Of course it is. You're bringing outsiders to our Hollow, making a fuss with newspapers, universities. This has always been a quiet place, and you're ruining everything. Martha set the hoe on the ground and turned completely to face Barney. Barney, I didn't call any journalist. She came on her own. And as for the university professor, I didn't even know he had taken pictures. Liar! You're doing all this just to get attention, to become a tourist attraction here and make money off of us. Barney, you've had too much to drink. Go home and sleep it off and stop talking nonsense. Nonsense? He stepped closer with a threatening expression. I'll show you who's talking nonsense. Martha realized the situation was getting dangerous. Barney was clearly drunk and agitated. She positioned herself so she could run if needed and raised her voice. Barney, get off my property now. Or what? You're going to call that battalion of defenders of yours? I don't need to call anyone. You can leave nicely, or I'll make you leave. Barney laughed unpleasantly. You? A little woman? How are you going to make me leave? That's when a firm voice interrupted the argument. She won't need to make you leave, Barney. I will." It was Mr. Arthur, accompanied by Clifford and 2 other men from the Hollow. They had come running when they heard the raised voices. Barney looked at the group of men and realized he was outnumbered. "You're sticking your noses into something that's none of your business." "Of course it is," Mr. Arthur said calmly. "You're threatening a woman on her own property. That's any decent man's business." "And what's more, Barney," Clifford added, "we know it was you who threw rocks at Martha's house. If that happens again, we'll call the town police." Barney looked around, realizing he'd lost the argument. But before leaving, he turned to Martha with a hateful expression. "This isn't over, woman. You'll regret bringing all this trouble to our Hollow." "Goodbye, Barney," Martha said simply. The man staggered away, muttering threats nobody could clearly understand. The men stayed until they were sure he had completely left the area. "Thank you, everyone," Martha said sincerely. "Don't mention it, Martha. Barney's a problem when he drinks, but deep down, he's a coward. With witnesses, he won't dare do anything," Mr. Arthur reassured her. "Even so, it's better to be careful. At night, lock up the house well," Clifford suggested. After the men left, Martha went back to work, but with less peace of mind than before. Barney's threats worried her, especially because she knew he had already vandalized her work once. She decided it would be prudent to change her routine. Instead of working until dusk, she would start putting her tools away earlier and stay inside after dark. She also resolved to ask some neighbors to keep an eye out for any strange movements during the night. Even with these worries, Martha managed to make good progress that day. The back wall was almost finished, and she had started working on the last remaining wall. In a few more days, if all went well, the house would be completely covered in mud. That night, while preparing dinner, Martha reflected on all the changes that had happened since she began the project. She had faced criticism, threats, and attempts at intimidation, but she had also discovered support where she didn't expect it, had reconnected with neighbors, and had found an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. The project had become much more than a simple home renovation. It had become a journey of self-discovery and healing. Each layer of mud she applied not only protected the house from the cold, but also protected her from the loneliness and despair she had felt after Harold's death. She was finishing dinner when she heard a soft knock at the door. She tensed for a moment, fearing it was Barney coming back. But when she opened it, she found Daisy with her mother, a young woman named Sarah, whom she only knew by sight. "Good evening, Mrs. Martha," Sarah said timidly. "Sorry to bother you during your dinner time." "It's no bother. Please, come in." "Actually, we came here because of Daisy. She wouldn't stop talking about you and about what happened today with Barney. I thought I should come meet in person the person my daughter admires so much." Martha was surprised and moved. She hadn't realized her friendship with Daisy had made such an impact on the child. "Daisy is a very special girl. She's been wonderful company for me." That's all she ever talks about. Mrs. Martha this, Mrs. Martha that. She comes home all excited telling me about the work you're doing. Daisy, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. "Mommy, tell Mrs. Martha about her grandpa." Sarah smiled. "That's right. My father, who is Daisy's grandfather, was a builder too. He died when she was still a baby, but I always heard my mother talk about the old techniques he used. One of them was exactly what you're doing, covering a wooden house with clay to protect it from the cold." "Really?" Martha was interested. "Yes. My mother always said the houses he built stayed cozy in the winter and cool in the summer because of that technique." "And where did he learn it?" "From his own father. It was something that was passed down from father to son. Unfortunately, when he died, the knowledge was lost." Martha was moved to discover this connection. Knowing she was using a technique that had been preserved and passed down through generations made her work feel even more meaningful. "Sarah, would you like to learn how it's done? I could teach you if you're interested." "Wow, that would be amazing. I've always wanted to learn something about building, to feel closer to my father." "And can I help too?" Daisy asked hopefully. "Of course you can, sweetheart." "Then it's settled. Tomorrow morning, if you don't mind, we'll come back to learn," Sarah said excitedly. After they left, Martha felt profoundly happy. Not only had she found new friends, but she had also discovered an opportunity to preserve and pass on traditional knowledge. It was as if Harold were there, approving the idea of teaching others the techniques he valued so much. The next morning, Martha woke up with even more energy than the previous days. She prepared extra clay, knowing she would have helpers for the first time since she began the project. Sarah and Daisy arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, both wearing old clothes and ready to work. Martha first taught them how to prepare the clay to the right consistency, explaining the ratio of dirt, water, and straw. "The secret is the straw," she explained, as the two watched attentively. "It works like reinforcement, holding the clay together and keeping it from cracking when it dries." "How do you know if the consistency is right?" Sarah asked. "Experience and observation. The clay has to stick to the wood, but it can't run. It has to be firm enough to form an even layer." Daisy was an enthusiastic learner, asking constant questions and trying to perfectly imitate Martha's movements. Sarah, in turn, showed a natural ability she may have inherited from her father. "Mrs. Martha, this is therapeutic," Sarah commented after an hour of work. "I feel calmer, more centered." "It's true," Martha agreed. "I discovered that too. Working with your hands, seeing the progress little by little, is very comforting." The three women worked together all morning and managed to finish the side wall that had been left incomplete. The work flowed naturally, with gentle conversation mixed with periods of quiet concentration. "Mommy, look how beautiful it turned out," Daisy exclaimed, admiring the newly finished wall. "It really did. Mrs. Martha, you are an artist." "I'm not an artist, Sarah. I'm just a woman trying to keep a promise." "Sometimes it's the same thing," Sarah said thoughtfully. Around 10 o'clock, they took a break for coffee that Martha had prepared. They were sitting on the porch, admiring the progress of the work, when they saw an unfamiliar car approaching. From the car stepped a well-dressed middle-aged man, carrying a leather briefcase. For a moment, Martha feared it was another problem related to Diane, but the man approached with a friendly expression. "Good morning. May I speak with Mrs. Martha Miller?" "That's me. What can I do for you?" "My name is Lawrence Thorne. I'm a professor of architecture at the State University. I would very much like to speak with you about your work." Martha remembered that the journalist had mentioned this name. He was the professor who had photographed her work and posted it on social media. "Professor, you should have asked for permission before photographing my house and posting it on the internet." "You are absolutely right, and I sincerely apologize for that. It was an impulsive act on my part. I was so impressed with the technical quality of your work that I wanted to share it immediately, but I recognize I should have asked your permission first." The man's honesty and humility impressed Martha. She decided to give him a chance to hear what he had to say. "All right. What would you like to talk about?" "Mrs. Martha, I have been studying vernacular architecture for over 20 years, traditional building techniques that are being lost to modernization. What you are doing here is a perfect example of a technique that is both ancient and modern, sustainable and efficient. Are you saying that what I'm doing has scientific value?" "Exactly. The technique you are using is superior to many modern methods of thermal insulation. It's ecological, inexpensive, and extremely efficient. I would like to document your process to preserve this knowledge," Sarah interjected into the conversation. "Professor, my father used this same technique, but the knowledge was lost when he died. It would be wonderful if this could be preserved for others to learn." "Exactly. That is precisely what I am proposing. Mrs. Martha, I would like to document the entire process you are using, but this time with your full authorization. We could even create an instruction manual so other people can learn." Martha became thoughtful. The idea of preserving Harold's knowledge more broadly was appealing, but she didn't want her personal life exposed unnecessarily. "Professor, I agree to collaborate, but with some conditions." "Which are?" "First, I want to maintain my privacy. No personal interviews or exploitation of my story of grief. Second, I want part of the documentation to include Sarah and Daisy, who are learning the technique. Third, any material produced must be made freely available to anyone who wants to learn." All those conditions are perfectly acceptable. In fact, they make the project even better. "Then it's agreed." The professor spent the rest of the morning observing and photographing the work of the three women, always asking permission before each photo and explaining how the material would be used. He also took technical measurements and detailed notes on the composition of the clay and the application technique. "Mrs. Martha, may I make a technical observation?" he asked after watching for a while. "Go ahead." "You are applying the clay in cross layers. This wasn't in the traditional methods I knew of. Is this an innovation of yours?" Martha stopped working and thought about the question. "It's not my innovation, it's instinct. When I look at the wall, I see where it needs to be reinforced, where it needs to be smoothed. My hands just do what feels right." "That's even more impressive. You've intuitively developed a technique that's improving an already excellent method." Sarah looked at Martha with admiration. "Mrs. Martha, you don't even realize what you're doing that's so special, do you?" "What do you mean?" "You're creating art, you're preserving tradition, you're teaching other people, and you're doing all of this simply out of love." Sarah's words touched Martha deeply. She had never thought of her work in those terms, but she began to see it was true. Her project had become much bigger than she had initially imagined. Professor Lawrence continued documenting the work until noon, when he said goodbye, promising to return the following week with some students interested in learning the technique. "Professor," Martha called to him before he got into his car, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you find out I was doing this?" "Honestly, it was accidental. I was passing through the hollow to visit some old buildings in the area, and I saw you working. I was intrigued because I recognized the technique, but I'd never seen anyone execute it with such precision nowadays." "And do you believe it really works? That it will keep the house warmer?" "I'm absolutely certain. This technique has been used for hundreds of years because it truly works. Your house will be much more comfortable in the winter and the summer." After the professor left, the three women resumed their work with renewed energy. Knowing that what they were doing had scientific recognition gave the project new meaning. "Mrs. Martha," Daisy said, while carefully spreading a small portion of clay, "do you think I can learn to do this as well as you?" "I'm sure you can, dear. You have skillful hands and a willing heart. That's all you need." "And when I grow up, can I teach other people too?" "Of course you can. In fact, I hope you do. That way, the knowledge will stay alive." Daisy smiled radiantly, clearly proud to be part of something important. Lunch was a special time. The three sat at Martha's kitchen table, sharing a simple but tasty meal. Martha hadn't felt so welcomed and happy since before Harold's death. "Sarah, may I ask you a personal question?" Martha said while serving more soup for her guest. "Of course. How do you manage raising Daisy on your own? It can't be easy." "It really isn't. But Daisy is a special child, and my father helps me a lot. And now I have you too, who've become a sort of heart grandmother to her." "Heart grandmother?" Martha repeated, touched by the expression. "That's how she refers to you. She says you fill the space that was missing in her family." Martha felt her eyes fill with tears. She and Harold had never been able to have children, and they had always missed having a larger family. Discovering she was filling that role in Daisy's life was an unexpected gift. "Sarah, you and Daisy fill a space that was missing in my life too." "So we really are a family, right, Mama?" Daisy said naturally. "Yes, we are, my dear. Yes, we are." The afternoon passed quickly with the three of them working together. They managed to completely finish another wall, leaving only a small section to complete on the last wall. Martha calculated that in 2 or 3 days the work would be finished. "Mrs. Martha, how will you feel when it's done?" Sarah asked. "I haven't really thought about it yet. I think I'll feel relief for having kept my promise, but also a certain sadness for the project ending." "Why sadness?" "Because this work has given me purpose, kept me busy, connected me with special people like you. I'm going to miss this." "But who says it has to end?" Daisy asked. "What do you mean, dear?" "You can teach other people, like the professor suggested. You can help other families make their homes warmer." The girl's suggestion planted a seed in Martha's mind. She had never considered the possibility of continuing to teach and practice the technique after finishing her own house. "You know something, Daisy. You may have had a very good idea." "Really?" "Really. Perhaps I really can help other people, teach families like yours how to make their homes more comfortable." "I can help!" Daisy exclaimed excitedly. "And me too," Sarah added. "We could form a small team of women experts in traditional techniques." The idea was thrilling. Martha imagined a future where she could honor Harold's memory, not just by finishing their house project, but by sharing his knowledge with other families in the region. "Let's finish my house first," she said with a smile. "Then we'll think about what comes next." In the late afternoon, as Sarah and Daisy were preparing to leave, there was another surprise. Mr. Arthur appeared accompanied by an elderly man Martha didn't know. "Martha, I'd like to introduce my brother Silas. He came from the big city for a visit and was curious to meet you." Silas was a man of about 70, with completely white hair and kind eyes. He observed the work on the house with an expression of deep respect. "Mrs. Martha, it's a pleasure to meet you. My brother told me about your project and I was very impressed." "Thank you, Mr. Silas. You remind me of my mother. She was also a strong, determined woman who wouldn't let anything or anyone stand in the way of her projects. Did your mother also work in construction?" "Not exactly, but after my father died, she renovated our entire house by herself. Everyone said she was crazy, that a woman didn't know how to do such things. She proved them all wrong." "And how did she manage it?" "With determination and hard work, just like you. And do you know what the result was?" "What?" "Our house became the prettiest and most comfortable on the street, and my mother earned everyone's respect. The people who laughed at her at first ended up asking for advice about their own homes." Silas's story moved Martha. It was comforting to know other women had faced similar challenges and triumphed. "Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Silas. It's inspiring." "You're welcome, Mrs. Martha. And when you finish here, if you want to take on any more projects, you can count on me to help. I know a thing or two about carpentry and woodworking." "I'll remember the offer, thank you." After the visitors left, Martha was alone for the first time all day. She sat on the porch and observed the progress of the work. The house was unrecognizable, almost completely covered with the smooth, uniform clay coating. More than the physical transformation, she reflected on her own. A few weeks ago, she was an isolated, grieving woman, an object of pity and malicious gossip. Now she had become a source of inspiration, a teacher, a dear friend to people she hadn't even known before. The project had begun as a way to fulfill a promise to her late husband. It had become a journey of self-discovery, community, and preservation of traditional knowledge. It was so much more than she had dreamed when she picked up that first bucket of clay. That evening, Martha prepared a special dinner. She made the dish she always prepared to celebrate important moments: pot roast with vegetables and cornbread stuffing. She set 2 plates on the table, as she always did, and talked to Harold as if he were present. "Harold, my love, I think you'd be proud of what I managed today. Not just the work on the house, which is almost finished, but the people I've met, the friendships I've made. Our house is going to be nice and cozy like you always wanted, but it's also become a place of connection and learning." She imagined Harold smiling, approving not just the technical work, but also how she had opened herself to new friendships and experiences. "And you know what else, my love? I think I found a new purpose. Maybe I can teach other people the things you taught me. Maybe I can honor your memory by helping other families have more comfortable homes." The idea of a purposeful future filled Martha's heart with hope. She didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but she felt she was on the right path. The next morning, Martha woke with a certainty. This would be the day to finish the project. Only a small section of the last wall remained, and she was determined to finish everything before nightfall. She started working very early, even before breakfast. She wanted to be alone in the final moments, to properly reflect on the meaning of that time. Her hands, now calloused and skilled from constant work, moved with confidence and precision. Each application of mud was deliberate, careful, loaded with intention and love. She knew this would probably be the last time she would work on that wall, and she wanted every movement to be perfect. Around 9 o'clock, Sarah and Daisy arrived, followed shortly after by Mr. Arthur, Mrs. Beatrice, and Clifford. Word had spread that this would be the day of completion, and several people wanted to witness the final moment. Mrs. Martha, Daisy said, running toward her, "Can I help you finish?" "Of course you can, sweetheart. You're my official assistant." Daisy smiled radiantly and picked up her small bucket. Martha let the girl apply some of the last portions of mud, creating a special memory for both of them. "There," Martha said finally, giving the last touch to the wall. "It's finished." A respectful silence fell over the small gathered group. Everyone observed the transformed house, now completely covered with a uniform coat of mud that glowed softly under the morning sun. "It's beautiful," Mrs. Beatrice said sincerely. "It's truly beautiful." "And different," Clifford added. "It has its own personality now." Martha took a few steps back to observe all the work. The house had completely transformed. The wooden walls, once exposed to the elements, were now protected by a smooth, uniform covering that promised durability and comfort. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked. "Complete," Martha answered without hesitation. "For the first time since Harold left, I feel complete." Mr. Arthur approached and touched the wall with admiration. "Martha, this is going to last for decades. You did professional work." "I learned from the best teacher," she said, looking at the sky as if speaking directly to Harold. Professor Lawrence arrived around 10 o'clock, accompanied by 3 university students who were eager to see the final result. "Mrs. Martha, this is extraordinary," he exclaimed upon seeing the finished house. "The uniformity, the texture, the integration with the natural environment. It's a master's work." "Thank you, Professor. May I document the final result?" "Yes, you may." The professor and the students spent almost an hour photographing and measuring various aspects of the construction. They made detailed notes and technical comments that impressed even the neighbors who were less knowledgeable on the subject. "Mrs. Martha," one of the students said, "you've created a practical sustainability manual. This house will consume much less energy for heating, will last much longer, and was built with completely natural and renewable materials. And the best part," another student added, "is that anyone can learn this technique. You don't need expensive equipment or industrialized materials." Martha smiled, thinking of how proud Harold would be to know his knowledge was being recognized and valued by academics. Around noon, when the small crowd finally dispersed, Martha found herself alone before her transformed house. She sat on the porch and simply observed for a long time. The house looked completely different, yet deeply familiar at the same time. It was as if it had always been this way, as if the clay covering was its natural garment. The wooden windows and door contrasted beautifully with the smooth texture of the walls, creating a visual harmony that was both rustic and elegant. Martha entered the house and immediately noticed the temperature difference. Even though it was still midday, the inside was noticeably cooler than the outside, promising great comfort during the summer. She imagined what it would be like during the winter, with the clay walls retaining internal heat and protecting against the biting cold. She went to the bedroom and opened again the trunk, where she kept Harold's clothes and mementos. She took the notebook where he had written his plans for the house and opened it to the page showing the drawing of the thermal insulation. "We did it, my love," she whispered to the drawing. "We managed to make our house exactly as you dreamed." She traced the outline of the drawing with her finger, remembering every conversation they had about that project. Harold always spoke with shining eyes about how wonderful it would be to have a perfectly insulated house where they could grow old comfortably together. "I know you're not here physically anymore, Harold, but I feel your presence in every corner of this house. I feel your love in the walls that protect our memories." Martha closed the notebook and pressed it to her heart. For a moment, she felt a deep and absolute peace. The promise had been fulfilled, the dream realized, the love honored. In the afternoon, she received an unexpected visit. Father Thomas appeared to see the final result of the work. "Mrs. Martha, I came to bless your house," he said with a warm smile. "Father, that is very kind of you." "It's not kindness, it's recognition. You have turned a simple renovation into a demonstration of faith, love, and perseverance. That deserves a special blessing." Martha was moved by the gesture, Although not very religious, she understood the symbolic meaning of what the priest was offering. Father Thomas walked around the house, gently touching the walls and whispering prayers. When he finished, he addressed Martha again. "May this house always be a home of peace, love, and happy memories. May the walls you built with such care protect not only from the winter cold, but also from life's storms." "Amen," Martha said sincerely. "And may the love that motivated this work continue to spread, touching other lives and inspiring other hearts." The priest's words touched Martha deeply. She realized her project had truly become something greater than she had imagined. It had become a symbol of hope and renewal. The late afternoon was dedicated to cleaning up and organizing the leftover materials. Martha carefully stored the tools she had used, thinking she might need them again if she decided to teach others. She was organizing the last items when Daisy came running up, holding something in her hands. "Mrs. Martha, look what I made," the girl exclaimed, showing a small picture frame made with twigs and dried flowers. In the center, she had glued a photo she had taken of Martha working on the house. "Daisy, how beautiful," Martha exclaimed, genuinely moved. "It's a gift for you, so you'll always remember how brave and strong you were." Martha took the frame and examined it carefully. The photo showed her applying clay to the wall with an expression of absolute concentration. Around the photo, Daisy had placed small dried flowers and leaves, creating a natural and delicate frame. "Thank you, dear. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Did you really like it?" "I loved it. I'll put it in the living room where I can see it every day." Martha hugged Daisy affectionately, feeling again that immense gratitude for the child's pure and sincere friendship. When evening came, Martha prepared a special dinner to celebrate the completion of the project. She set her best dishes on the table, lit candles, and prepared an elaborate meal as if she were hosting special guests. She sat at the table and looked at the empty chair where Harold used to sit. But this time, instead of sadness, she felt a comforting and approving presence. "Harold, we finished our project," she said aloud. "Our house is exactly as you always wanted it. It's protected, warm, welcoming. And more than that, it has become a symbol of love and perseverance." She paused to savor the food and the feeling of completeness. "And you know what else, my love? I discovered I'm not alone. I made true friends, found a family of the heart, and discovered I can honor your memory not just by preserving what you taught me, but by sharing it with others." Martha finished dinner and went to the porch to look at her house under the soft moonlight. The clay walls seemed to glow with their own light, creating a magical and cozy atmosphere. She sat in the rocking chair and simply observed and reflected. She had started that project as a lonely, desperate widow, trying to cling to her husband's last unfulfilled promises. She had finished as a strong, confident woman, surrounded by friends and full of plans for the future. The project of covering the house with clay had been much more than a renovation. It had been a journey of healing, self-discovery, and rebirth. Each layer of clay applied had also added a new layer of strength and purpose to her life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Martha woke up for the first time in weeks without specific work to do on the house. It was a strange feeling, almost unsettling. She was so used to the daily routine of preparing clay and applying it to the walls that she didn't quite know how to structure her day. She went out to the porch and looked at her house with a critical eye, searching for any imperfection or area that needed touching up. But she found nothing. The work was truly finished, executed with technical and artistic perfection. Martha was preparing her coffee when she heard a knock at the door. It was Sarah, carrying a basket covered with a clean cloth. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha. I brought fresh bread I made last night." "How kind, Sarah. Come in, let's have coffee together." The two sat at the kitchen table, and Martha realized how pleasant it was to have company during the morning meal. "Mrs. Martha, may I ask you a question?" Sarah said after a while in comfortable silence. "Of course. What are you going to do now that the house is finished?" The question echoed Martha's own thoughts. "To be honest, I don't know yet. I was thinking about it last night." "And have you reached any conclusion?" "Perhaps. Remember the idea of teaching others? I think I could take that seriously. Seriously? Sarah got excited. Yes, I thought we could start small. Maybe teach a few families here in the Hollow who want to improve the thermal insulation of their homes. Mrs. Martha, that would be wonderful. There are several houses here that could benefit. Exactly. And we could charge a symbolic amount for the work, just to cover the materials. It wouldn't be for the money, but to help people. Sarah was thoughtful for a moment. Do you know what else this could represent? What? A way for women in the community to gain economic independence. If we formed a group of women experts in this technique, they could have their own source of income. The idea of female empowerment through traditional knowledge excited Martha. It was a dimension of the project she hadn't considered, but that made a lot of sense. Sarah, you're right. We could create a cooperative of women specializing in traditional construction techniques. And I could help with the legal and administrative part, using my legal knowledge. What legal knowledge? Martha asked, surprised. Oh, didn't I mention it? I have a law degree. I work part-time at a firm in the bigger city, but I've always wanted to use my knowledge to help the local community. Martha was impressed by the revelation. Sarah, you're full of surprises. Everyone has their hidden talents, Mrs. Martha. You've discovered yours in the last few weeks. That's true. The two continued talking, gradually developing a plan for the women's cooperative. They identified several neighbors who might be interested in learning the technique and began imagining how to structure a training program. Mrs. Martha, there's an important detail we need to consider, Sarah said. What? You'll need a certificate or some kind of official credential to teach construction techniques. Even though it's traditional knowledge, the authorities might require some kind of formalization. Martha became worried. She had no formal training in construction, only the practical knowledge she had acquired by watching Harold and executing her own project. Could that be a problem? It could, but there are solutions. Professor Lawrence mentioned he wants to document your techniques, right? Perhaps he can help us formalize this through the university. Good idea. I'll talk to him the next time he comes here. They were finalizing their plans when they heard the sound of several cars approaching. Martha looked out the window and was surprised to see 4 vehicles stopping in front of her house. Who could that be? Sarah asked. I have no idea. They went out onto the porch and saw a group of people getting out of the cars. There were men and women of various ages, some carrying cameras, others with notepads. An older, well-dressed man approached first. Mrs. Martha Miller. That's me. Can I help you? My name is Stephen Vance. I'm the Regional Rural Development Secretary. I came here with a delegation that includes representatives from the university, the county government, and the local Builders Association. Martha was confused. She didn't understand why so many authorities would be interested in her personal project. How can I help you? Mrs. Martha, your work has attracted a lot of attention on social media and in the regional press. We are here to discuss the possibility of turning your technique into a regional sustainable housing program. How so? Professor Lawrence appeared from the group, smiling. Mrs. Martha, after I documented your work, I presented the findings at several academic and governmental forums. There's a lot of interest in implementing your technique on a larger scale. But this is just a renovation on my house. It's much more than that, Ricardo interrupted. You've developed a sustainable, affordable, and efficient solution for thermal insulation in low-income housing. This could revolutionize housing programs across the region, Sarah Jenkins interjected into the conversation. Excuse me, but Mrs. Martha just finished her project yesterday. Perhaps it would be better to give her some time to process all of this before making any big decisions. You're right, Ricardo agreed. We didn't come here to pressure anyone. We came to present possibilities and hear Mrs. Martha's opinion. Martha Miller sat on the porch, trying to process everything that was happening. In a matter of minutes, her personal project had turned into something of regional interest. Can I know exactly what you're proposing? A woman from the group stepped forward. My name is Dr. Rachel Morgan. I coordinate housing programs for the region. We are proposing to create a pilot project where Mrs. Martha would teach her technique to low-income families who need to improve the thermal insulation of their homes. And would there be payment for this work? Yes. You would be hired as a specialist consultant. There would also be funding for materials and a training program for other people interested in learning. Martha looked at Sarah, seeking guidance. Her friend gave her an encouraging look. Can I have some time to think about this? Of course, Ricardo said. It's an important decision that shouldn't be made in haste. How much time can you give me? Would a week be enough? Yes. The group spent another half-hour explaining details of the proposal and showing preliminary documents. When they finally left, Martha's head was spinning with so much new information. Sarah, do you believe what just happened? Mrs. Martha, you've become an important person without even realizing it. Important how? You solved a real social problem using traditional knowledge and intuitive innovation. That has a lot of value in today's world. But I just wanted to keep a promise to my husband, and look what it's turned into. Sometimes when we follow our heart sincerely, we end up doing things bigger than we imagined. Martha spent the rest of the day reflecting on the proposal. The idea of turning her personal project into something that could benefit many families was tempting, but she also feared losing the intimate and emotional essence of what she had done. That afternoon, she decided to visit the church to talk with Father Thomas. She needed spiritual guidance to make such an important decision. Father Thomas, I need some advice. Of course, my child. What's troubling you? Martha told him about the government's proposal and her doubts about whether to accept it. Mrs. Martha, may I ask a question? When you started this project, what was your true motivation? To keep a promise to my Harold. And now, what would your motivation be if you accepted this proposal? Martha thought carefully before answering. To honor his memory by helping other families have more comfortable homes. Then the motivation is the same, only the scale has changed. That's true. My child, when we have talents and knowledge that can help other people, we also have a responsibility to share those gifts, not out of obligation, but out of love for our neighbor. The priest's words clarified Martha's thoughts. She realized that accepting the proposal would be a natural extension of what she had already done, not a betrayal of Harold's memory. Thank you, Father. I think I know what to do. When she got home, she found Daisy Jenkins waiting on the porch. Mrs. Martha, is it true that some important men came here today? It's true, dear. They want me to teach others how to do what I did for our home. And will you do it? I think I will. That's wonderful. That way more houses will be as cozy as ours. The simplicity with which Daisy saw the situation helped Martha confirm her decision. The girl was right. What mattered was that more families could have comfortable homes. That night, Martha made her final decision. She called Sarah and asked her to come the next day to discuss the details of the response they would give to the government representatives. Sarah, I've decided to accept the proposal. That's marvelous. I think it's the right decision. But I want to do it my way. I want it to be a project done with love and care, not just bureaucratic efficiency. I completely agree. Let's set our own terms. The two spent hours structuring a counter-proposal that maintained the values and principles that had motivated Martha's original project. The next morning, they called Stephen Vance and scheduled a meeting to present their conditions. Mr. Stephen, Mrs. Martha agrees to participate in the project, but with some requirements. What are they? First, she wants complete autonomy over the teaching methods. Second, she wants the project to focus on families in need, not commercial interests. Third, she wants a women's cooperative to be created to continue the work. Those are very reasonable conditions, Stephen replied. In fact, they improve the original project. And there's more, Sarah continued. Mrs. Martha wants part of the work to be done here in the Hollow so she can maintain her roots and community connections. We accept that too. When could we start? In 2 weeks. That gives us time to organize the details better. After the call, Martha felt relieved and excited. She had managed to accept the opportunity without compromising her values. The next 2 weeks passed quickly in preparations. Martha organized a basic manual of the technique. With the help of Professor Lawrence, Sarah structured the legal aspects of the women's cooperative. Daisy helped organize materials and tools. The first class of apprentices would consist of 10 women from the region, selected based on economic need and interest in learning. The course would last 1 month, with practical and theoretical classes. On the first day of class, Martha was nervous. It was the first time she would formally be a teacher of anything. The 10 students arrived promptly at 8 in the morning. They were women of various ages, from young mothers to retired ladies, all interested in learning a skill that could improve their lives. Good morning, everyone. My name is Martha Miller, and I'm going to teach you the traditional thermal insulation technique with clay. One of the students raised her hand. Mrs. Martha, is it true you learned this technique on your own? I learned by watching my husband work and by practicing a lot. And that's exactly how you'll learn too, by watching and practicing. The first day was dedicated to basic theory, appropriate soil types, mixing proportions, preparation techniques. Martha discovered she had a knack for teaching, explaining complex concepts in a simple and clear way. The first thing you need to understand is that this technique isn't just about construction. It's about care, love, preservation. Every layer you apply carries intention and affection. An older student commented, Mrs. Martha, that reminds me of when my grandmother made bread. She said the bread turned out well, not just because of the recipe, but because of the love she put into the dough. That's exactly it. Traditional construction is like traditional cooking. It has technique, but it also has soul. The course developed wonderfully. The students were dedicated and curious, asking smart questions and suggesting creative adaptations for different situations. In the second week, they began the practical exercises in an abandoned house that the town hall had provided for training. Martha observed each student individually, correcting techniques and offering encouragement. Maria, try to make the mixture a bit more consistent. Yes, much better. Anna, good technique. You have naturally skilled hands for this work. Rosa, don't get discouraged. Everyone has difficulty at the beginning. With practice, it gets easier. Sarah and Daisy often showed up to help and observe the progress. Daisy had become a sort of mascot for the group, cheering up the students when they felt down. Did you see how beautiful Mrs. Martha's house turned out? She said enthusiastically. You'll be able to do the same. In the third week, the students were already working with confidence and autonomy. Martha could give general instructions and let them work on their own, intervening only when necessary. Everyone, are you ready for the final challenge? She announced in the last week. What challenge? They asked in unison. Each of you will choose a wall in your own home to apply the technique. You'll work alone, but I'll be available for consultations. The women were excited but nervous at the prospect of working in their own homes. Mrs. Martha, what if we ruin it? One of them asked. You won't ruin it. Trust yourselves and what you've learned. During the final week, Martha visited each student at her home, observing the work and offering guidance when needed. It was moving to see the technique being adapted and personalized by each woman according to her specific needs. On the last day of the course, all the students gathered at Martha's house for an informal graduation ceremony. They had prepared a collective lunch and brought photographs of the work they had done in their homes. Everyone, I want to thank all of you, Martha said emotionally. You taught me as much as I taught you. How so, teacher? A student asked. You taught me that shared knowledge multiplies, that work done with love inspires other people, that it's never too late to learn new things. The students applauded, and many had tears in their eyes. Teacher Martha, the oldest student in the group, said, You changed our lives, not just because of the technique you taught us, but because of the confidence you gave us. How so? You showed that a woman alone can do amazing things, that we don't need to wait for others to solve our problems for us. The words touched Martha deeply. She realized the course had been transformative not only for the students, but also for herself. After the ceremony, when everyone had said their goodbyes, Martha sat on her porch to reflect on the experience. In just a few months, her life had completely changed. From an isolated, grieving widow, she had transformed into a teacher, mentor, and community leader. Sarah and Daisy arrived to help with cleaning and organizing. Mrs. Martha, how do you feel after this first course? Sarah asked. Fulfilled. More fulfilled than I've felt in a long time. Will you keep teaching? Yes. There's already a waiting list with 20 more women interested in the next course. And the cooperative. Several students from this class have already expressed interest in forming the cooperative. I think we can formalize it in the coming weeks. Daisy, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. Mrs. Martha, can I ask a question? Of course, dear. Would Mr. Harold be proud of you? Martha looked at the girl and smiled with eyes full of happy tears. I think so, Daisy. I think he would be very proud. Why? Because I managed to turn the love he left me into something that can help many other people. That evening, Martha prepared a special dinner. She set 3 places at the table, one for herself, a symbolic one for Harold, and one for all the women who had passed through her life during that transformative period. Harold, my love, she spoke to the empty chair, our house turned out exactly as you dreamed, but it was only the beginning. Your knowledge will now bless dozens of other families. Your wisdom will live on, passed from one generation to the next. She paused to savor the food and the feeling of completeness. And I'm not alone anymore, my love. I've found a family of the heart, a new purpose, and a way to honor our memory that goes beyond my wildest dreams. Martha finished dinner and went to the porch to look at her house under the starlight. The clay walls seemed to glow with their own light, radiating warmth and welcome, even in the darkness. She sat in the rocking chair and reflected on her journey. It had begun as a lonely attempt to fulfill a promise to her dead husband. It had transformed into a celebration of life, community, and renewal. The project of covering the house with clay had ended weeks ago, but her true mission was just beginning. Every new student she taught, every family she helped, every technique she preserved, would be a new layer of meaning added to her life. Martha looked at the starry sky and whispered a deep gratitude. Gratitude for Harold and all he had taught her. Gratitude for the wonderful people who had entered her life. Gratitude for having found the strength to turn grief into purpose, loneliness into community, promise into mission. The clay house had become much more than a warm home. It had become a symbol of rebirth, a center of learning, a landmark of hope. And Martha, who had begun as a subject of laughter and mockery, had transformed into a source of inspiration and positive change. She stayed on the porch late into the night, mentally planning the next classes, imagining new applications for the traditional techniques, dreaming of the positive impact she could have on other families' lives. When she finally prepared for bed, Martha took one last look at the walls of her transformed house. They were no longer just protection from the cold. They were a testament to love, perseverance, and renewal. They were living proof that it's never too late to start over, never impossible to overcome challenges, and no act of sincere love is ever too small. The next morning, Martha woke with renewed energy and a mental list of future projects. The phone rang early. It was Stephen Vance, the Secretary of Rural Development. Mrs. Martha, good morning. I have a proposal that might interest you. What kind of proposal? We would like you to consider expanding your program to other regions of the state. There are rural communities that could benefit enormously from what you're doing. Martha grew thoughtful. The idea was exciting but also intimidating. Can I talk with my team and give you an answer in a few days? Of course, there's no rush. After the call, Martha called Sarah and explained the new proposal. Mrs. Martha, this is an incredible opportunity. You could impact hundreds of families across the state. But it would also be a very big commitment, and I don't want to lose the personal essence of what we're doing. You don't have to lose it. We can structure it so you maintain control over the program's quality and philosophy. And how would we do that logistically? We could train local leaders in each region. You would train local teachers who in turn would teach the techniques in their communities. The idea of multipliers made a lot of sense to Martha. It would be a way to expand the impact without losing the quality or the essence of the teaching. Sarah, I think you're right. Let's accept, but in our own way. In the following weeks, Martha became involved in structuring a statewide sustainable housing program based on traditional techniques. She would be the general coordinator, responsible for training the multipliers and supervising the quality of the teaching. The program was officially launched 3 months later, with great repercussion in the regional and national press. Martha found herself being interviewed by newspapers, magazines, and television programs as an example of social innovation and the preservation of traditional knowledge. Mrs. Martha, do you consider yourself a social entrepreneur? Asked a journalist during an interview. I consider myself a woman who found a way to turn love into practical action, she replied. And what is your long-term goal? That every Brazilian family has access to a dignified and comfortable home, using sustainable techniques that respect our environment and our cultural tradition. Martha's answer went viral on social media, and she received hundreds of messages of support and admiration from people all over the country. But despite all the attention and recognition, Martha never forgot her origins. She continued living in her clay house in Hope Hollow, continued maintaining local friendships, and always made time to sit on the porch and talk to Harold as if he were there. 1 year after the start of her personal project, Martha organized a house birthday party. She invited all the people who had been part of her journey: neighbors, students, authorities, Professor Lawrence, Father Thomas, and especially Sarah and Daisy. "Everyone," she said during the party, "exactly 1 year ago, I was a grieving and lonely woman, covering my clay house to fulfill a promise to my husband. Today we are here celebrating not just a transformed house, but transformed lives." The guests applauded, moved. "I want to thank every person who believed in me, who supported me, who learned from me and taught me. You have shown me that work done with love always multiplies its results in unexpected ways." Daisy, now 11 years old and even sharper, approached Martha. "Mrs. Martha, can I make a speech too?" "Of course, dear." Daisy climbed onto a chair to be taller and addressed the guests. "Folks, when I met Mrs. Martha, she was sad and everyone laughed at her, but I saw she was doing something beautiful, even if others didn't understand." The child made a dramatic pause. "Now everyone sees she's amazing, but I always knew. Sometimes you need to believe in people before others do." Daisy's improvised speech drew tears of emotion from several guests, including Martha. "Thank you, my heart daughter," Martha said, hugging the girl. "You're welcome, my heart grandma." The party continued late into the night, with music, traditional dances, and many stories shared. Martha watched everything with a permanent smile on her face, feeling complete and fulfilled in a way she had never imagined possible. When the last guests had left, Martha was alone on her porch, watching the stars and reflecting on her incredible journey. Her clay house had become much more than a home. It had become a symbol of hope, renewal, and the transformative power of love. She looked at the photograph of Harold in the living room window, illuminated by the soft moonlight. "Harold, my love, we achieved more than we ever dreamed. Our home isn't just warm and cozy. It has become the heart of a quiet revolution of love, knowledge, and solidarity." Martha remained on the porch for a few more minutes, feeling the night breeze gently touch the clay walls of her house. Each touch of the wind seemed to whisper stories of all the lives that had been touched, all the homes that had been transformed, all the dreams that had been realized from that simple project of love and determination. When she finally turned in for the night, Martha knew that tomorrow would be the first day of more adventures, more teachings, more opportunities to turn love into practical action. Her mission was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to show its full transformative potential. The clay house slept in peace, its walls radiating warmth not just physical, but emotional and spiritual, protecting not just one woman, but an entire network of dreams, hopes, and endless possibilities. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Martha made the right decisions? We'd be happy to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.